Welcome to Fully Booked, the bookish podcast where I'll chat about all things book and reading related. Whether you're new or a pro reader, there's something for everyone to learn. I'm here to help you on your reading journey and find that next great read that will keep you fully booked. Hello, readers, and welcome to episode 43 of Fully Booked. I'm your host, Natalie, and today's episode is going to be my June reading wrap-up. But before we get into all the stats, what books I ended up completing, I did want to give you guys a little story time of some of my road trip adventures, which you guys probably saw a little sneak peek if you are following my podcast Instagram and you saw my Instagram stories. You probably already know where I went if you happen to follow my personal Instagram. But I guess to reveal now, if you don't know where I went, I did make the road trip to Chicago from Toronto, which I have to say was actually not that bad, at least on the way there. But yeah, Chicago was a really fun time. We got to do a lot of the touristy things. We walked the Magnificent Mile. We did a architecture river tour. That was actually my husband's first time doing that, so I think he really enjoyed it. I've personally done it before, I think the very first time I went to Chicago, but I was happy to do it again and see all of Chicago's cool architecture and different buildings. The architecture and buildings in Chicago are also way different from Toronto's cityscape. But anyways, yeah, we had a really good time, tried a lot of different food spots this time around, and there was also this really cool area pretty close to our B&B. I think it was about 1 kilometer away, called Fulton Market District. And it was cool because I don't know if it was just for the summertime, but they had part of the street completely closed off for pedestrians. So you could walk along the whole middle of the street or the sidewalks past all the shops and restaurants and cafes there, which was pretty cool. And we went to this really good coffee spot around there, which is funny because we ended up finding one in a different location the day after that and went again. It was called La Colombe, I believe, and it was really good. They had something called a draft latte and a half tan, which it was some sort of combination of like cold brew and a latte. So you got this really smooth taste and I guess after feel. I don't know, sorry if that is the right word. But yeah, it was very good. I really liked the taste of both of those, and they had oat milk, which is good because I can't have dairy. But yeah, you guys should definitely check out that area as well as some of the other areas outside of the very downtown core of Chicago if you do go. A couple more notes I'm going to add before I finish talking to you guys about this. I was not that impressed with deep dish pizza. I thought it was going to be something really amazing in terms of the taste, and honestly, it just tasted like regular pizza, except it had this very thick outer crust, and it was more like a pie. Unfortunately, we did have a bit of trouble coming back across the border on the way back. Now, if you guys are from Canada or the States, then you've probably experienced at least once crossing the land border. But I guess if you haven't, obviously, when you're driving between Canada and the States, you have to cross the land border, and then you have to answer before you can be on your way. So, when we pulled up to the border, which, by the way, we drove through Detroit on the way back. So, I don't know if that made a difference, because we went through Sarnia on the way there, and especially because it was a Monday morning, again, they were very chill. But on the way back, we pull up to the border. The Border Patrol asked us, I think, where we were, how long did we stay, and then I think she asked the question, did you purchase or receive anything? Which oddly was a bit weird. I've just never really heard the Border Patrol officer word it like that when they ask, what did you buy? Because sometimes they're more direct. They're just like, did you buy anything? Or they ask, how much did you spend? But she asked, did you purchase or receive anything? And honestly, my husband and I, we were both kind of out of it at that point. We'd just been on this trip. I forget how long we'd been driving by then, but I think at least 4 hours by that point. We were pretty tired. And so he answered no. And obviously that was the wrong answer because we brought a bunch of snacks and other stuff back. And since I was out of it too, it took me a second too long to realize that he had answered no. And then the officer immediately looks at her car, and she asks him to roll down the window. And then she says, "Sir, I see you have a Trader Joe's bag back there." Yeah, and then she asked us to hand her the bag, so we gave her the bag. She looked through everything that was in there, and then yeah, basically we got into it a bit with her. I don't know if that's the right word, but yeah, obviously there was confusion because he didn't exactly realize what she had asked. I don't think he heard like the whole question or something, whatnot. Yeah, so it was a whole thing, and I didn't really know what to do because I could tell this officer had a little bit of attitude from the way she was talking to us. And so I did not really want to get into it there with her. But yeah, needless to say, we got pulled over. They literally took almost all of our stuff out of the car, went through all of our belongings in the trunk, and yeah, and we had to talk to another officer who actually was much nicer than the first one that stopped us. Yeah, and then we kind of talked to him. We explained, kind of just basically answered wrong. And honestly, he was actually very understanding. And he said, oh, like, we still have to have precautions and do our job, that kind of thing, which I understand. But yeah, it's just kind of funny because, like, we literally just had snacks in the back. I think the biggest thing we brought back were 2 cases of Coke. So I was like, if they're going to take that away, then I guess whatever. But anyways, after they searched our car, it was totally fine. They let us go. But yeah, that was just the whole thing. So guys, please make sure to listen when you're going through the land border because, yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of funny because I haven't been pulled over in a while. Like, surprisingly, some border officers are chill, but we just happened to get the one that wasn't that day. So yeah, that is our road trip adventures for the summer. But anyways, going back to today's wrap up, let's first dive into the monthly highlights before we get into each review. So, to start, I ended up completing 10 books in the month of June, which is solid because I did not expect to hit the double digits this past month going into the summertime. So, yay for that. And I ended up reading 4 out of 6 of my monthly hopefuls. And then, as for my seasonal TBRs, I read 1 book from my spring TBR, which was The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. And then I also completed 2 books from my summer TBR, which were Middle of the Night by Riley Sager and Sounds Like Love by Ashley Poston, which the latter I am going to talk about a little bit in today's wrap up. And then we only had 1 DNF, which was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. And then in addition to my seasonal TBR, I'm also not going to be talking about these 2 books that I read in June, which were Almond by Son Won Pyong and How to Tell the Truth by Preston Perry. But those are all going to be in upcoming episodes, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Honestly, I don't have a lot of notes on how reading went this past month. I feel like the month of June was just such a blur with the start of the summer season and then preparing to go on a road trip at the end of the month. And also preparing for some things that were going to be happening in July. So I just wasn't really thinking a lot about some of the books I was picking up, especially near the end of the month. And yeah, I can't even remember what I was thinking throughout my reading journey this past month. So that is all I have to say on that. And I think that's probably a good segue to continue on into the reviews for each of the 10 books that I read. Hey readers, I hope you're enjoying the episode so far, and hear me out before you hit skip. I'm so grateful for all my listeners who are with me on this reading journey, and I'd like to ask that if you haven't yet, please leave a rating and review as it helps others find the podcast. Also, please consider supporting the podcast financially as it helps me bring you more exciting content, and you'll get some extras like bonus and subscriber-only episodes, early access to new episodes, and much more. The link to donate will be in the show notes below, or you can go to buymeacoffee.com/fullybookedpod. Thank you so much again for choosing to listen to Fully Booked, and now back to the episode. Alright everyone, so we started off the month of June reading a banger, and that was Daisy Hates the Great Undoing by Jessa Hastings, which I ended up rating it 4.25 stars, which I think is the highest rating I've given to a book in this series so far, and I gave it 2.5 chili peppers. I'm trying to condense my thoughts for this review because, actually, first of all, I always try to keep all my reviews non-spoiler on my main podcast platforms, as you guys know. But I've also been releasing spoiler reviews for each of the books in this series, and the spoiler review for this book is actually already up on my Buy Me a Coffee. It's been up before this episode even released, so if you want to go listen to more of my crazy thoughts on this book, you can click the link in the show notes to go to my Buy Me a Coffee platform and get access. Yeah, I always leave that there for you guys. But anyways, getting into this book. So this book and The Long Way Home, to me, I felt like had a lot more overlap in the events and timelines compared to the first two books in this series. And it's always interesting having the overlap and getting it told from the different point of views, especially because we're so much in these characters' heads. We get so much of what they're actually thinking and feeling when we get each person's different point of view. And I really enjoy getting that in this book. And I have to say that I feel like this book and the last Magnolia book, you do start to gain a lot more understanding and appreciation for these characters, their storyline, and their overall growth as the series goes on. Because I feel like with the first two books in this series, some things are a little vague and there's not complete context to each of the characters and why they are the way they are. And I think, yeah, in Daisy and Julian's case, there was a lot more that I wanted to find out about them and see unpacked even after reading the first Daisy book. And I feel like we got that in The Great Undoing, which I was very pleased with. And I think I just appreciate Daisy and Julian's character growth more compared to Magnolia and BJ as characters. Obviously, I personally like Christian as well and some of the stuff he's also gone through. But yeah, Daisy and Julian are, yeah, just kind of my faves in this series. There were definitely some things in the middle of this book that I could have done without with. Some parts were a little slow, but overall, I can see why this is some people's favorite book in this series. And I know I haven't read Into the Dark yet, but considering that I love the Daisy side of the universe much more, I feel like this book is going to be my favorite as well, unless the next Daisy book does it for me. But I'm not sure how long we're going to be waiting for that one. So we will really have to see there. And then I think honestly the only other thing I'm going to say right now is that if you were not a Julian girl before reading this book, you will be after. Alright everyone, so the second book that I read in June was It's a Love Story by Annabelle Monaghan, and it's kind of funny because I somehow totally forgot to mention this book as an anticipated release in the last Bookish News and Adaptation episode that I did, because this book technically did come out at the end of May. I think it came out like May 27th or something like that. But anyways, you guys know by now, Annabelle Monaghan is a newer favorite romance author of mine. Anything that she writes, I'm going to pick up, so no surprise that I got to this one so soon after it was released. And this review is going to be interesting. I have thoughts on this book. So first of all, I ended up rating this one 4 stars and I gave it 2 chili peppers. And I have to say, the start of this book felt different. Maybe it was partly because of this setting in the movie industry. We also have this background for the FMC where she was a child star growing up, and we see how that is still continuing to affect her in adult life and the way she processes and thinks about all different kinds of situations. But yeah, overall, just this kind of setup and everything felt different, where I feel like her characters and their lifestyle were a bit more quiet in some of her previous books, especially because a lot of them were single moms who are divorced and trying to start over and whatnot. So yeah, this one just felt different right at the start, and I'm gonna be honest, I was not sold on the premise and our MCs in this story, but I think Annabelle Monaghan is so special because as the story went on, especially as the romance storyline progressed, this book became more like the Annabelle Monaghan that I've come to know and love. And yeah, I did appreciate the progression more as we got on into the book. Oh, I will say, I didn't really enjoy the third act breakup personally. I felt like it could have been avoided. I kind of understand why she wrote it like that, because I think in this book, the FMC had a lot that she needed to process and overcome internally to get to where she needed to be and to be in a place to be in a relationship with Dan. But yeah, personally, though, just the execution of it, the way it was done, I just didn't like it. But anyways, even though there were things, like I said, that I didn't like about this book, I think the childhood star part didn't really resonate with me, because I wasn't really a fan of that many, I feel like, TV shows growing up. And it's interesting thinking about that because I was having this thought at the very end of the book where I was like, this feels very like iCarly inspired, or specifically Jeanette McCurdy and how she wrote that memoir, What I'm Glad My Mother Died. Oh no. I don't know why the title for memoirs just gave me, but it gave me that kind of feel and the story that we were going through, especially with Jane's character. And then literally I get to the author's notes or acknowledgments, and the first thing she mentions is Jeanette McCurdy in that memoir. So that was kind of funny. But anyways, I have to say, regardless of not liking all the plot points and some of the romance progression, Annabelle Monaghan is just the best writer in terms of writing things that are very ordinary and real, and how I think people experience falling in love in real life. Like, I don't really know how to describe it other than that, but just the way she writes about how the two love interests will see each other for how they actually are and how much they still love them as a person and want to be with each other is just done in such a beautiful way that I've not been able to find in any other romance books so far. And I feel like her books remind me that I really need to do an episode at some point in the future where I'm just reading favorite quotes or convincing you guys to read my favorite authors through quotes. I think actually the other biggest note that I did want to make on this, because I could go on forever, but I did want to say that this book got a little bit more open door than her previous books. I feel like all her previous adult romance books were very closed door, but this one, the scene that happens, we do go a bit more open door and descriptive, but compared to other authors that I've been reading recently, it's definitely still not a spicy book. But yeah, that's why I gave it 2 peppers, because we did get a little bit more description, but for me, it still wasn't that bothersome. Yeah, I feel like I wrote this in my review too, that Annabelle Monaghan is just not your typical romance author, especially if you like more fast-paced, light, fluffy, bingeable romances. I feel like there's some points and themes that she brings up that always hit a little bit closer to home for some of us. And yeah, even that book did that. This book did that a bit for me. So yeah, if you are looking for a bit of a different romance author, however, though I highly, highly recommend this book or any of her other books. Alright, so I wasn't actually going to talk about this book in today's episode because it is going to be featured in my summer TBR follow-up as well once that is eventually released. But I ended up enjoying this story so much that I felt I could not talk about it in today's wrap-up, since I did finish it within the last few days of the month of June. So with that, I picked up and completed Sounds Like Love by Ashley Poston, which I ended up rating 4.5 stars, and I gave it 2 chili peppers. Now, this book is going to be hard to talk about because obviously I don't want to spoil the magical realism concept and premise of this book, but I am going to note that this is a story where from the very start, she sets it up so that you already know who is going to be the voice that the FMC is hearing in her head. It's pretty obvious, I think, to anybody who will pick up this book. But yeah, I think this book overall just surprised me. I honestly thought it was going to be a little more based on vibes, and I'm not really sure why. But I think just with books, any books that are music concepts, I'm a little bit iffy, because I think with music, it definitely has to be like well researched enough, but still have, I don't know, just enough magic in the writing and in the characters and in the setting, things like that. And I think it's just hard for authors to find that balance, especially if they're not musical connoisseurs or really into music or anything like that, which I'm not sure if Ashley Poston is, from what I actually read in the acknowledgments after I finished this book. But I will say, I think she did her research really well. Actually, first of all, going back a bit, I did really like the setting in this book, being kind of in this small town in North Carolina and going to the beach every day. And yeah, she described the setting well. But also, what I've realized about Ashley Poston's books and why she's become and actually still is a favorite author of mine is that she is really good at describing how memories are tied to like specific things in our life. So like for instance, the 7-Year Slip, I feel like that one was really tied to like memory and relationships and food. And then the same thing was done in Novel Love Story, except with books. And in this one, it was tied to music. And I think I really enjoyed this one because personally I like music a lot, and I think I have some very strong associations and memories with music, maybe even more so with food, which is crazy because I also like food, which is why I initially enjoyed the 7-Year Slip so much. I think I'm gonna have to see which one is my new favorite of hers because yeah, this book might potentially be my favorite of Ashley Poston's that I have read so far. And I think I liked how strong the family relationships were in this book, but they still also like struggled and would have trouble relating to each other and with like inner demons and things that they wrestled with, but they just didn't want to share with the other person. The one note I did want to make though is that I find the reason Ashley Poston is never a 5-star author for me is because at least with A Novel Love Story, and again with this book, the plot kind of dragged in the middle for me. And I don't know why she does that. Not much is happening. I think it's because she does want this build up to the reveal behind, you know, the initial premise she has for her stories, which always end up being so good. Like, honestly, I was crying and tearing up by the time I got to the end of this book. But yeah, I actually was not very invested in the middle of this book. And I actually put it down for a bit because I was almost getting a little bored. I also wasn't totally sold on the romance and the connection between our FMC and MMC. She definitely sold me by the end of the book, I will say that. And I have to admit, I know so many people usually recommend starting with the 7-Year Slip by her, or they say that is their favorite, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that if you want to try a book by Ashley Poston and you really love music and you have strong associations with it and with memories, then I would pick up this one by her. And just a reminder, I am going to talk about this book again in my summer TBR follow-up episode, so if you want to hear more about this book, as well as a couple other books, make sure to check out the link for my Buy Me a Coffee, which I leave in the episode show notes, so you can get access when that episode releases. Okay, so this next book that I'm going to talk about is probably going to be a bit of a surprise because if you guys have been paying attention to my romance book tastes, sports romance isn't usually in the lineup of romance books that I typically pick up and enjoy. I think I briefly talked about how I DNF'd the first 2 Icebreaker books by Hannah Grace last year for various reasons. So I was actually surprised even with myself that I ended up completing The Right Move by Liz Tomford, which, if you don't know, is book number 2 in her Windy City series, which is basically a sports romance interconnected standalone series that all takes place, partly in Chicago and centers around Chicago's major league sports teams. And in this one specifically, we are focused on basketball, and we follow Ryan Shea, who is the new captain of the Chicago Devils. I think he's also the starting point guard or something like that. Guys, I don't know anything about basketball and player positions or anything, so please don't mind. And then we also follow Indy, who is Stevie's best friend, which if you don't know, the first book is centered on Stevie and Xander's. Actually, spoiler alert, I actually already started Mile High. But anyways, so basically this book, we have a couple tropes going on, to say the least. So we have best friend's brother, we have forced proximity because Ryan and Indy basically end up living together because she needs a place to live in Chicago. And then we also have a fake dating situation because basically Ryan kind of gets himself into a bit of a pickle early on in the book, and he then requires a girlfriend. So, we have all that going on in this book. I don't think I need to say too much beyond the tropes in TBH because there's a lot of this book that is honestly just face value. I'm going to be honest. This book kind of suffered from some of the same problems as probably what I experienced in Hannah Grace's books. There's some particular language used either in their inner monologue or dialogue that is not really my preference. If you guys don't know, I don't really like books that use a lot of swearing and every other word is like effing this and that. This book wasn't as bad actually as Hannah Grace, but there were there was some language that came up still that I didn't really enjoy. That's a very personal bias, I think. And then also, these books are very spicy. You guys should probably know as well, I don't usually do spicy books. And it was hard because I actually did enjoy a lot of aspects of their relationship and the relationship arc. Also, their individual character arc I actually thought was done decently in this book for a sports romance. But yeah, just reading about, that aspect, their relationship and the spice, I'm not gonna lie. There were probably 3.5 chapters that I ended up skimming or skipping completely because as soon as I got there, I just didn't really feel like reading about that. So if you normally don't like spicy books, yeah, just know you're gonna be skipping some chapters. But other than that, I think the reason I kept reading and enjoyed this book was because I did see some actual character growth. I felt the characters in this book at least, and hopefully it's like this in the other books as well, they were actually very real and flawed, and there was a lot that each of our main characters in this book needed to work through in order to be in a relationship with each other. So yeah, so I think there were some redeeming elements about this book, even though the writing style was not my particular usual taste. So definitely too, if you want a book where honestly you can just kind of go in, have fun, don't expect too much, and yeah, if you're looking to try sports romance, then definitely I would pick this one up. Oh, and sorry, one more thing before I move on to the next review or section of today's wrap-up. The only thing that got confusing with this book was that I realized after doing a little bit of looking online, Liz Tomford made up the names of the teams in this book. These are not the real names of Chicago's like hockey, basketball, or baseball teams. And the name that she chose for the hockey team, and that also gets referred to repeatedly, even in this book, was the Chicago Raptors. And if you guys know, I think even a lot of people know, even if you're from the States, Toronto are the Toronto Raptors for basketball. So every time she would say the Raptors, because she wouldn't say the full name too, she would just say Raptors. In my head, I'm thinking Toronto Raptors, I'm thinking basketball, but then they mentioned hockey players, and I would get so confused in my mind until I realized, I don't know when I looked it up, but I think I might have been maybe a third of the way in the book by then. I finally looked it up and realized she made up these names, and Chicago aren't actually the Chicago Raptors. I forget what their actual hockey team name is now. But yeah, that just really confused me because I'm sorry guys, like everyone knows the Toronto Raptors, even if you don't live in Toronto. So yeah, personally, this is probably just me, but I think she should have picked a different name. Alright guys, so the next book that I completed in June was Allegiant by Veronica Roth, which is the last book in the Divergent series, which was good because if you guys remember, one of my reading goals for 2025 was to reread the whole Divergent series. So that is now done, but whether I actually enjoyed this book as a whole or not, that's a whole nother story that I'm about to tell you guys. So I think I already voiced my disappointment back when I finished Insurgent. So if I was disappointed with that one, this one was just on a whole other level up. Let's just say that. I feel like the reason why I still complete this book, besides the fact that I wanted to just finish the series at this rate, I feel like there was enough action in the plot going on throughout most of the middle of the book, I would say, that it was keeping me engaged. But I think the overall plot and what we were trying to work towards in this story was kind of getting lost on me. Like, I just didn't really understand why everything was happening. And I think especially after some big things that get revealed and go down in Insurgent, we kind of get this bigger picture of the world itself. And so we know that we should be like working towards something, and especially the third book, like it should have a good finale, like a grand conclusion, to the plot for our main characters. And this book just, like, by the time we got to that point or we were getting there, it fell flat. I already knew what was going to happen, but even when it happened, it just left such an unsatisfying conclusion. I know like some authors really don't care, I guess, how the fans are going to feel about how things are concluded, and they'll just go and do a certain thing that Veronica Roth did with one of our main characters. And yeah, I just don't know. Some people said they kind of guessed already because of the I guess, kind of narration style that she uses in this book. I don't want to spoil it just in case people still have not read this series for some reason. But yeah, I think this book is also just difficult because it came out like shortly after the Hunger Games series, like the books and those movies came out. And so I feel like Divergent got so much comparison with the Hunger Games series, and the Hunger Games was so beloved. Yeah, the Hunger Games was just such a hit, and then Divergent would just feel so short compared to it. I kind of feel bad for the series because maybe if it come out at a slightly different time, there wouldn't have been that comparison, but there is. And yeah, this one, I just didn't really know what to do with the ending, and the ending just kind of seemed unhopeful. Like, when I was literally reading, I think, the last chapter and the epilogue from a certain character's point of view, I just felt like, oh, this is the ending we're getting this book. Like, it was just so unsatisfying. And I'm sorry, I just realized I rambled on so long, I didn't even give my rating yet. So, just so you guys know, I did end up rating this one 3 stars. But again, pretty much no spice. I forget if I gave it a spice. Oh, I literally gave it 1 chili pepper. So, there you go. Do with that what you will. It's hard because I would still recommend this series for the first book alone, but the series as a whole, I'm feeling a little bit meh about it as an adult. And now, on to the final book in June. Now, this one's not too exciting, so I'm going to try to make this review quick, and that was The Tenant by Frida McFadden, which I ended up rating 3.25 stars. And it's funny that I started this one because I honestly just wanted something very quick and easy to read, heading into our road trip to Chicago, but I ended up finishing this one before we even left for Chicago, because it was just that fast and bingeable, as is expected with any Frida McFadden book. And I have to say, this one was like 1 step up above The Crash, probably barely, but compared to her other books, it was still some levels down. I would say the main plot twist was just not that twisty, for lack of a better word. Like, I just felt, to me, even though I didn't necessarily predict what it was going to be, it was still predictable by the time she revealed it. And I've just been getting the same feeling with the last, I guess now 3 Frida McFadden books that I picked up. So yeah, honestly, this book was still okay. Like, it is what it is. Oh, except that I was not a big fan of the MMC in this book yet again, but I never like any of her MMCs. They tend to be these very stereotypical alpha males, which maybe is a little bit realistic to some extent. But yeah, just the way it was written, I mean that in the negative sense. Just that it was not enjoyable to read necessarily. But yeah, in terms of Frida McFadden books overall, again, at this point, I just want to go through a couple of her backlist books that I know people enjoyed. But otherwise, I'm not feeling so great about Frida's books anymore in terms of thrillers. Okay, so I'm going to try to speed through the DNF section of today's episode because there are a couple more days left in June at the time I'm recording this, but I'm being very hopeful that I will not DNF any more books this month, and we will only have this one DNF, and that is The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I also talked about this one in my spring TBR follow-up, so I'm actually not going to say much about it here. You should probably go listen to that episode if you want to hear a bit more. But yeah, for this one, it was just one of those literary fiction novels that was a snooze fest for me, and I hate saying that, and I never like to hate on books, but yeah, for some reason the writing style was just not screaming and compelling me to continue reading the story. I just found it kind of boring. I felt the way the author wrote was surface level. I don't know if that's just my own experience, but I think I'm just being, again, pretty honest, maybe a little brutal with myself, especially this year, and DNFing, and just being completely okay with hard DNFing books. And unfortunately, this book is probably going to be one that I do not return to. And before we end today's episode, let's quickly go through the best versus worst picks for the month of June. Now, this should be no surprise from the thoughts that I gave on each of these books, but for June, I'm going to pick Sounds Like Love for the best book, and the worst book is going to be Allegiant. Honestly, Ashley Pawson was just on the nose with this most recent book, especially again with all the quotes and aspects related to music and memory. It really just solidified her as an auto read author for me from now on. And she's honestly the type of author that I feel like if she were to branch out and start writing different genres of books, I would read them still, even if they weren't her typical magical realism romance books. I still hope she continues writing magical realism romance for now because I've been enjoying every single one, but I think I would read her books regardless. And then, of course, I already expressed disappointment with Allegiant, but I think it's safe to say that if I had not read Allegiant this past month, I think The Tenant would have been my worst pick for the month of June. But considering Allegiant being part of a series like as a whole, and just how the ending could have been more satisfying for the third and final book of a series, yeah, that's why I ended up picking this one. And that now brings my June reading wrap up to a close. I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about all the different books that I got to read as the summer started, as well as some of my road trip adventures. As always, make sure to let me know what you were reading in the month of June, and if you also have any summer plans, because let's be honest, summer technically is till late September, so we still have a couple months left. So yeah, whether you're doing a staycation, hitting the road like I did, or even going further than that, let me know. I'd love to hear anything that's happening to you guys, reading or non-reading related. And for those of you who may be new listeners, hello and welcome, and make sure to go do all the things, rate and review the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, and make sure to go and subscribe to the podcast YouTube channel. I do post all video and audio episodes on there, so you can get notified immediately whenever I do so. I post every Tuesday, and if you're somehow caught up on all of my current episodes, I do have early access and bonus episodes exclusively on my Buy Me a Coffee page. So that link is always in the show notes or description for you guys to access, and that is just another way to support the podcast if you would like. I do appreciate if you guys choose to do so. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for being here with me today, and I will see you all in episode 44. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you were able to take away something, and be sure to follow the podcast for more bookish content. Until next time, stay fully booked, and I'll talk to you soon.